As long as Bitcoin price action is stuck between the supply and the demand of the low 90,000s to the low 70,000s, neither bearish or bullish confirmations can be made. And if we go to the even lower time frame, I would be looking at this swing high of 95,000 and this current swing low we have of 78,000. I can see us chopping in this range for the next short while. I would be careful though of comparing it to this chop too soon. If we spend the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is in this range, in that case, I could see many start to draw comparisons to this range we had here. That recency bias kick in and then a move be made. If you are someone who's still bullish, then I would look to maybe DCA in slowly in this range if we're not getting a breakout or breakdown. But if you want to play it on the safer side and wait for confirmations to be made before getting back in, then at the very least I would look for a break and a hold above this swing high we had at 95,000. But what are my opinions? Am I bullish? Do I think the bull market is still on? Or am I calling it a top? Are things done? For me, in my opinion, all news, biases, sentiment aside, if I clear the Bitcoin chart and zoom out and just look at this in a very neutral point of view, I cannot say that the top is in with this breakdown. You may be going through YouTube and Twitter right now and seeing that it's very polarizing. Everyone is saying either it's still on or things are done. When in reality, as we just discussed in the first minute of this video, it's still up in the air until certain levels are cleared. In other words, no one knows, right? But over my years, one thing that I noticed is that bears have a lot of incentive to call tops. That's because if it is the top and things break down and they quote unquote end up being right, then they will gain a lot of social credit, will be looked at with a lot of respect, that they know what they're talking about, stuff like that. That said, if things eventually go to the upside, yes, a few people will point it out that they were wrong, but it doesn't matter because the vast majority of people who are still long crypto will be richer if this happens. And so they don't really care about who's saying what at this time. They want to know what's happening up here, what to do with their increased net worth. I see this take place quite often whenever there's a quote unquote debate for things to go to the downside. Even this very cycle, you may not remember it, but a lot of people were saying that the top is in at 74K, that we're going to go down to the 40s, the 30s, and even back when we were at 30K, when so many were adamant that we were going to make new lows. You don't remember any of them, and nor does it matter because we went to the upside. So being a bear in crypto, you probably wondered, right? If Bitcoin is always making new highs every cycle, why would anyone be a bear? Because if you're fortunate enough to call a top, then there is a lot of social credit to gain from that. But if you're wrong, it doesn't matter. And so it's a great risk reward thing to post. And so with our recent top and breakdown, we're now starting to see a lot of these bears come back saying, I told you so, whatever it is. And I suppose my warning to you is that once again, with the first minute of this video and what we talked about, no one truly knows. And so you don't want to get too invested one way or the other. We'll obviously find out at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later. Now, before I get to what I think, here's the way to play this. It's not about being risk on or risk off during periods of uncertainty like we have right now. There is a spectrum, okay? I don't care what you choose because, again, right, it's up for debate. No one knows. But no matter what, there are a lot of nuances with whatever you choose. For example, if you go fully risk off, into stables, capital preservation mode. That's fine. But then you have to ask yourself, okay, do I eventually want to go back risk on if things are confirmed to go to the upside with those levels that we talked about being 95K and such? If you are, you need to realize that you'd be buying a lot of these crypto back after they already maybe pumped a 2x even. I understand that altcoins are getting destroyed right now, but they can easily, within the blink of an eye, come back and pump and erase a lot of what they dumped. If you're okay with that, that's great, but you need a plan, an emergency buyback plan, I call it, for if we are bullish and you know that at a certain point you would like to re-enter that capital. The other side of it is being completely risk on, which I also respect, right? If things are bullish, which we'll get to in a second, then you would have caught the most upside for when that upside occurs, if that makes sense. So in the case of something like, I don't know, CRV curve, which you guys know I'm very bullish on, and how it's currently 40 cents, by the time that quote unquote confirmation occurs, it might be at 60 cents. But obviously, if things do break down, let's say for Bitcoin, we go back under 78K, go down to the 70s, CRV curve may go back down to like 30 cents, right? But it does not have to be one or the other. There's options in between. Like you can go into Bitcoin or go into ETH or go into these larger caps, but it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? There's like a combination that you can play. For example, the -1 of being fully risk off is being fully in Bitcoin, where if things pump, then you'll still catch the upside somewhat, and then you can rotate from Bitcoin into altcoins, where you wouldn't be completely sidelined. But if things dump, you'll take the least dump possible by being in Bitcoin. And then being in ETH or Sol is basically the exact same thing, but more. So if we pump, you might catch, quite the gain on ETH or Sol before rotating into the altcoins that you like. And if you go to the downside, yes, they will dump more than Bitcoin, but still a lot less than some of these altcoins you may be in. This is the exact strategy I was saying to my Discord group over and over again when we were still in the 90s. Before the breakdown, bias was that we were going to go upward. However, I had a strong feeling that we could break down. Therefore, I got my Discord group ready by telling them exactly this. If you're not comfortable holding the altcoins that you're holding, realize that there's a very decent chance you might have to take another 50% hit. So if you don't like those alts, either go into Bitcoin or go into stable coins so that when we get that dump, you can maybe deploy them back, which is what a lot of them ended up doing. So now a lot of them have stables for these lows or big bags of Bitcoin for these lows. If you are confused and don't know how to play things right now, then join the Discord. There is a link in the description. I am actively working on a plan for how to play this range right now, the bull and the bear case. So if you're looking for some answers, there's your place. There is also the premium version to get a one-on-one call with me if you want to directly discuss your bags, what you're holding, if you should be holding them, the upside, things like that. Obviously, no pressure whatsoever, but I have been spending most of my time there. But going back to the spectrum, if you're going to stay in your altcoins, that's fine. But just make sure that you're willing to take another 50 to 70% hit on those altcoins because that could be the case. And not because it's a bad project, but just the time capitulation aspect of it. If things are done until later this year, then your altcoins may struggle quite a bit. So if you have a lot of conviction in them, and that's fine, I have my conviction bets as well. Make sure you are mentally ready for that. But if you're looking at your altcoins, you don't know why you're holding them, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with cutting them as well. But what do I think is going to happen? So, this is something that I've been thinking about over these past days. It's my opinion, haven't really seen anyone else say this, but when it comes to Trump, right, I think he has gone beyond, transcended this idea of red or blue. For him, it's completely about him. With every single topic, he makes it known that if something bad happened, it wasn't because of him, it was because of the Biden administration. Whether that's Russia, Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East, whatever it is, right? If I was there, it wouldn't have happened. The other day, he was asked about where he stacks up against Washington and Abe Lincoln, I believe. He was also asked about his picture being put up in the Oval Office. The man is getting old. He doesn't have that many years 5, 10, 20, whatever it is, right? The way I see it is for him, it comes down to his legacy. That's it. Everything else has already been dealt with. That's the only thing that remains. Because that is the case, I see absolutely no way for him to not make the economy do well under his 4 years. That said, though, he has quite the problem. As all of you are aware, and it's not just in crypto, but markets themselves, we are due quite the crash relatively soon. Whether that ties in to the bear market of crypto or the end of the 18-year real estate cycle or just everything else, right? How we've been kicking the can down the road for a very long time. We are due quite the correction, quite the crash. And it's quite likely that that happens in his 4 years. It's not guaranteed. The crypto part definitely is. But with the overall markets, it's also in that window. When he came into office, things were already up only since 2022. The stock market already did what it did. Nvidia already did what it did. Crypto did what it did. Gold, whatever it is. So with everything I just said, right, if I were to graph this out, it would look something like this. Where unfortunately for his case, I mean, if we're talking the midterm, it's quite likely that we reach a top within his first 2 years. Where once that top is put in, the correction that follows after is something he won't be able to do anything about, right? It'd be too substantial, it's beyond whatever he can do. It was gonna happen anyway, no matter who was in office. But again, it's in his 4 years. So it's gonna come down to Trump had a horrible economy this time around. And so that got me thinking, what can Trump do to make sure this doesn't happen during his 4 years? The obvious answer is that once that begins, right, you introduce mass QE and then things get sent. But we're never going to see a crash and recovery to that extent and that type of QE again like we did in 2020. And so that brings us now to his second option, which I think is what he's currently doing. He gets into office, and not so soon after, the stock market is looking like this. The most toppy it's looked like since 2022. In fact, I don't even think that Bitcoin is the problem. Bitcoin, in all honesty, looks kind of fine to me. I think the stock market is the problem. The SPX looks pretty bad. And he comes out and says the other day that he's not even looking at the stock market. I think Trump is causing short term pain and uncertainty because remember, the big thing is uncertainty. Once the market knows something, it can digest it. And people aren't quite sure what's happening with all these decisions he's making, him being rash, the tariffs, this, that, whatever he puts it in, pulls it out, trade wars, it's all over the place, right? Why is he doing that? He's doing it, it's causing this. This is bad, right? This is horrible. I can see the angle where he's doing all of this intentionally cause short-term pain, and by short-term I'm talking maybe 6 months, a year, where we do start to get serious downward price action. Things look like they did top, stuff like that. We were always in the window where things could have topped, obviously, but I think most would admit that it's kind of premature. I think a lot of us were expecting this maybe a year, 2 years from now. Why is he doing it now? Well, he's doing it now so that he can cause that type of pain. And then the cards of ending QT get played, inducing QE get played to cause a reversal where things then pick up again. And so then going back to our chart, our graph, I'm thinking, is he doing something like this, where he causes a premature end and then sends these things over the next couple years to make sure that net his 4 years, his last 4 years, were seen as extremely successful instead of what otherwise would have been something like this, where Trump came into office, things are great, maybe things accelerate, right? He's bullish for the economy, but then ultimately, we were already in blow off top territory. If you look at these angles of ascent, yes, in terms of the y-axis, they could have absolutely ripped even higher, but in terms of the x, it was going to end relatively soon. That is, of course, all my opinion. But if not that, obviously, whether it's right or wrong is a different discussion, but he knows what he's doing. And the excuses that he's been using with the tariffs and stuff like that don't quite check out, in my opinion. So then what else is it? I would like to see maybe a different explanation for all of this. Again, that's my opinion. But now going back to our Bitcoin, again, this is no man's land. You cannot get bearish or bullish in this area. And realistically, between the supply and the demand, anyone saying they know, they don't know. Here's why. Because I could see a 2017 style run, which is truly on the table. And if you're unaware, this was 2017, right? Up only. Look at that. In 2017, the first 3 months, just like now, were kind of boring, as per this box, where we underwent two plus 30% corrections over here and over here in Q1. And then it was in Q2 up until the end of the year, starting in May, really, where it was up only. And even then, multiple 30-40% corrections along the way. Who's to say this cannot happen? I won't. But then, realistically, the other side, as likely, is we are done for this cycle. Tops end. So the main takeaways, chop is not the end of the world. In fact, I would argue chop is kind of what we want. A V shape is quite unlikely. I don't see that. It would have happened by now in my opinion. I think if you're bullish, best case scenario is chop for maybe 20, 30 days. Again, don't get tricked into thinking this is going to happen, right? This is max pain for a lot of people. We chopped for basically like 8 to 10 months, went up for 2, and now to do that again and to be kind of down or comparable to what you had here sucks. But I could see maybe 20, 30 days before liftoff, honestly. And the biggest thing maybe is the catalyst. What is going to send things? For me, I think these things happen regardless, right? The ETF, strategic Bitcoin reserve, whatever it is, in my opinion, does not really matter. Price action is going to do whatever it does, and then we attribute certain news to it. If we go up, everyone will say, here's why. If we go down, people will say this is why. If we go down, for example, everyone is going to say, it's so obvious. The US went full pro crypto. That had to be the top signal. And yet, very few are saying that. And if we go up, you best believe there'll be a reason why. But quite frankly, I don't believe in any of that stuff. And another thing I'm seeing is, where is the money going to come from? We don't have enough money. Okay, fair enough. But they were saying the same exact thing back here at 16K, 16 to 20K. We don't have QE. How is Bitcoin going to get 2 all-time highs past it? And I would argue the money is already here. I think we have enough money. It may look like a blip now, but this drop in dominance right over here, this green box, this was enough to give us whatever altcoin run we had in November and December. Hypothetically, what would have happened if dominance kept going down to, let's even say, somewhere in the 40% region? Now, if you say that dominance won't break down, that's totally fair, right? That's a different discussion. I think it will. Even if it goes down just 10% from 60 to 50, that'd be quite something. The main thing though is you just cannot get complacent. If you're someone who somehow had stables during this time, you did a great job, but I've seen it a lot of times where they get comfortable holding those stable coins and then things go back up and it was kind of all for nothing. Now is not the time to get complacent. It's very obvious that this is probably the inflection point of this cycle. Whatever happens, whichever way we break, it'll seem obvious in hindsight, but for now, obviously, no one knows. For more content like this, make sure you're subscribed. I have not gone anywhere. There's not much to say. I have been spending most of my time and my days in my Discord group. So again, if you want to join that, there is a link in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I will hopefully see you in better conditions.